You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. A lot of interesting nuggets coming out about the White Sox as tickets went on sale for Sox Fest Live, which we talked about on the last episode of Sox in the Basement. And as the tickets went on sale, it was interesting, my friend. I had at least one listener send me their season ticket holder code so I could try to get a discount on tickets, which I thought was cute.
Oh, that was nice.
Yeah, I didn't use it, okay? I mean, in reality, it looks like the season ticket holder thing, because I went in on Tuesday morning to look at how the process was for buying tickets. And season ticket holder general admission is only $5 less than the regular general admission, $56 general admission for everybody, $51 for the season ticket holders. And again, that MVP package, $225. And guess what? It's not for the whole weekend. That's per day. So one person, $450 for the weekend. And by the way, the doors don't open on either Friday or Saturday until 5 p.m.
And it goes to 9.
Right, and it's over 4 hours later. So 8 hours. That's it. A total of 8 hours of interaction at Sox Fest Live, this reimagination of Sox Fest, which is nothing like the event that we're used to. The only thing it has in common with Sox Fest is they kept the name.
Right.
And they put live at the end of it because it really isn't the same festival. 8 hours over the course of 2 days total, in the evening both days, cost you a grand total per person of $450 for the thing that actually gives you access and you get to go everywhere you want to go, and you get a better chance of actually seeing players, and you get a little appetizer, and there's an after party and all this other stuff like that. That's the thing you want to go to. Or for 2 days, you spend a total of $112 for your 2 general admission tickets. And again, you're on the first floor only. There are some seating options, mostly standing options. There are some displays. A couple of players may interact. Dynamic photo opportunities, which essentially, if the guy walks by and wants to take a picture, I guess you get one with him. I don't know what that is. It's all very vague. And there's concessions available. Like, that's what you're paying to walk in there, and it's only for a couple hours each night. Like, I know there are fans that are going to go to it. They love the team. They want to go see all the players. To me, this is something that, like, might have been appealing if you had a really good team, or you were introducing some really big stars, or you were able to even tell me who was going to be there. But none of that is listed with these limited tickets available over 2 days. This is not Sox Fest. They shouldn't even have called it that. I know they put the live afterwards as a way of trying to say, look, we're trying to tell you it's different. This is really different. This is more of a meet and greet that's meant for people that have money to burn. Because if you're down there on those $56 things on the first floor only, you're going to be sitting there going, well, what did I get to do? I guess I can go buy a hot dog and spend more money. Like, that's how it feels to me reading it. I might be wrong. That's how it feels reading it. It's amazing, though. I opened that up and I was like, maybe I was wrong about it being per day, Ed. I'm not. That is per day price right there. And if you really want to go do the things that would make you even feel like it was somewhat like Sox Fest, $225 a day.
Yeah, you're not wrong. What have you said that anybody could sit there and say, no, that's incorrect, or no, that doesn't jive? I mean, we have very little information about who's going to be there, what interactive means, what dynamic photo opportunities are going to be available. And
it's as if AI wrote the description.
It probably did. Let's face it.
Make me a description for an event in which we don't have anybody scheduled and we don't have anything actually planned. And AI put it out. That's what it looks like.
Right. The only thing that AI could have done better was name it 2 evenings with players of white hosiery fashion. I mean, let's just make it fancy, pinkies out, the whole 9 yards. If you want to hold an intimate level event like that, then name it something else. Call it what it really is. And really advertise the hell out of what you're doing there. Now, you made a point in there about it would be something if they're introducing a bunch of big stars, but so far the free agency market does not, I mean, it just doesn't hold that the White Sox are going to be introducing anybody of real note or popularity.
No, the new rumor is that they're interested in Jacob Junis. Remember, he was a starting pitcher for the Royals in his 20s that had middling success, really wasn't that good. Bounced around a little bit and was a relief pitcher, essentially, like a swingman. He started in 6 of his 24 games last year. His whip was 0.851. In the 2 years before that, when he was with the Giants, and this would have been when he was with Brian Bannister, he had 23 games that he pitched in. 17 of them were starts in 2022 with a 1.295 whip, walks and hits per innings pitched. And then the next year, in his year 30, in 2023, he was still under Bannister. He was turned into mostly a relief pitcher. 40 games, only 4 of them started. He kept that whip under 1.30, which I always say is the standard. If you can get a starting pitcher that's under that, you got an effective starting pitcher. Closer to 130, he's probably a 3rd or 4th or 5th starter on a really good team. And if he's much lower than that, he could be ace level quality. But he was an effective pitcher, but mostly a swingman with some spot starts. And it's an odd name to hear that they're now targeting. And that's what the report was. They're targeting him. And the guys they're targeting early are extremely cheap. You watch them actually decide to save money on Gavin Sheets, which was a good idea. For some reason, though, they're going to spend $6 million on Andrew Vaughn, and Ryan Fuller is going to treat him like a project, and he'll probably be really good for a couple of months, and then he'll go back to replacement level by the middle of the year. That's what my prediction is. The early part of the year, you're going to hear people saying, remember when they want to get rid of him? Look how good he is. I just don't see it. But he was a high draft pick, so that's why they're keeping him around. And Ryan Fuller, their new hitting guy, must believe there's something he can do with Andrew Vaughn. But in reality, it seems as though there was money saving happening during arbitration overall. There were several non-tenders, and now their targets are guys that you're really going to spend $1 million to $2 million a year on to throw in there that are just kind of guys, not low quality guys, definitely guys they see some upside to. But am I going to see a $60 million payroll? Like, are you asking me to go to a stripped down version of Sox Fest that is not anything close to what it used to be for a much higher price and far lower hours at the same time that you're also lowering payroll even lower than the $90 million that would have put you at the bottom of Major League Baseball last year? Are you going for $60 million? I'm really confused by what's going on right now.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, Jacob Junis last year as a reliever from Milwaukee and Cincinnati had himself a really good year. And there's value in signing relievers. There's value in signing relievers who are not going to cost you a whole lot of money, especially if they're veterans who have some established stats and have shown that they've got some versatility and things like that. It's not about Jacob Junis being a bad player. It's about Jacob Junis not being a game changer and not being somebody that's going to help pull this team out of the doldrums because he's just a guy. There's a lot of Jacob Junises out there. And you're right. Brian Bannister had him. He was picked up off the scrap heap from the Royals, and Bannister did something with him and helped do something with his career. So he's a Bannister guy, which is great. And there's nothing wrong with it.
I get bringing in Bannister guys because you want to have those guys around that believe in the system to tell other guys, right, hey, this worked for me. And so I get that. If early on this is team building, right? This is changing the culture in the locker room, and that's why they're bringing in the guys they're bringing in, and that's why they're retaining guys, and this is the base, fine. But I mean, it's hard for me to believe that after you do this, these low-level signings that are building the team, are you then going to go out and sign a couple of guys that are bigger ticket that you're either going to flip at the midway point in the season, or at least put a couple professional hitters into your lineup to help those guys that are the base? Because if the idea is that the base is going to be low-level players that are never going to be stalwarts in your lineup, and you're going to rely on the young kids and the rookies to do this on their own, it's a recipe for failure. We've seen this before. You need to give some structure around those young guys. Whoever you're developing, there should be a couple of professional Major League Baseball players that make $10 million or more a year somewhere on your team. And you can do that and still cut costs ridiculously low and save a ton of money doing it. But I just don't like the idea of our base players are guys that wouldn't even make it on teams with a major league contract. You know, I mean, we're signing guys that aren't sure if they're getting MLB deals or non-roster invitees. And we're signing them as the base. If you're going to do this for team building and culture building, and then you're going to go out into free agency once you fix this stuff, and once you've set this up, if this is what you're doing while you're trying to figure out what you're getting for Garrett Crochet, and there's a second phase to this, it makes more sense to me. I just don't know if I trust that right now. Sox in the Basement listeners, switch to a new age of life. Keep mom and dad, grandma and grandpa out of assisted living. Maybe you're getting older. You're trying to figure out how to get around the house. You're afraid that you might hurt yourself. You're living alone. It's all about getting around on your own, living independently, stair lifts, ramps, grab bars, lift chairs, even bathroom remodeling, all at Hyatt Home Medical Equipment. They work with your insurance and have 0% financing for qualified individuals. And Hyatt also has the latest and greatest in CPAP machines. If you're unhappy with your vendor, switch now. Get supplies directly mailed to you. And if you're down on the south side, stop by the showroom. They have testing rooms and they'll show you all your options you probably don't even know about. They also have the latest in continuous glucose monitors and any medical equipment you can probably think of. See everything Hyatt Home Medical Equipment has to offer at hhme.com.
And to your point about Andrew Vaughn, right, and Ryan Fuller having projects, or Brian Bannister having projects, those are guys, I mean, Vaughn is a guy that you can never put too much stock into what he is or isn't because he's so damn streaky, and he's been so streaky throughout his entire major league career, where there are moments where he gets hot and you watch him, you're like, okay, I can see why they drafted him. And then there's moments where he sits there and he looks like a lost little puppy up at the plate, and you can't help but feel bad for the guy because he looks so overmatched. And you wonder, like, okay, well, what is the point of keeping an Andrew Vaughn around when there are guys out there that have shown some success in the majors that you can actually build around? Do you think that Andrew Vaughn is a stalwart in the lineup? Because, again, back to your point about you can't just do this with low-level guys, with glue guys alone, and then rely on rookies and rely on young guys to come up and come through. We have seen the game played with the White Sox of, while they have the talent, and the talent is so extreme that they can't help but succeed, but that's not how it works. Yohan Moncada was the top prospect in all of baseball. He had the talent, undeniably. I mean, everybody agreed on it, but it never panned out because it turns out Yohan Moncada may not be into playing baseball. It turns out Yohan Moncada has issues with injuries. It turns out that Yohan Moncada never was able to take the next step, whether it was coaching on the White Sox part or the inability for them to use metrics and inability for them to use scouting to give him the information that he needs to do this. This is where some of the questions are going to come in because you can get by without going out and signing established players to a certain degree. But even if you bring established players in, you cannot just rely on a guy to come in and be like Andrew Benintendi is an example of this. Andrew Benintendi can't necessarily come in and continue to be Andrew Benintendi if you're not going to develop him further by feeding him information about the pitchers he's facing or putting him in the right spot as a left fielder when you know he's not a miracle worker out there by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, he's really ordinary. And you see that a little bit with Luis Robert Jr. It's like, oh, he's got all the talent in the world. He's this guy who should be a perennial MVP candidate. We shouldn't need to worry about the White Sox signing Juan Soto because we've got the right-handed version of him playing center field for us. But no, instead we're sitting here listening to him be shopped around, and we're thinking about whether or not his value is going to be there on the trade market because he's never fully shown what he's capable of or what we're told he's capable of in the major leagues. And a lot of that and a lot of what we're looking at, I mean, Austin Slater, he's had some success. What's Austin Slater going to look like as a member of the White Sox if Will Venable's staff isn't better than Pedro Grifol's in terms of preparing the players to play on the field? And isn't better than what Pedro Grifol was given from the front office in terms of here's scouting, here's the stats, here's the way things work, here's what this guy that you're facing today is.
Well, here's the thing with these guys. I mean, and you talk about Slater. Okay, you've got a guy in there who's going to be your hitting guru. You believe that person's going to have good impact. Okay, that's great. But the White Sox have never been able to show that when a guy comes to them, he actually improves. They generally go backwards. And so
because they're not given an opportunity to prep. They're not given an opportunity to further develop. It's constant. There's no laurels to rest on in baseball.
So here's the thing. You mentioned Luis Robert Jr. And it seems very obvious, especially after the last Bob Nightingale article where he talks about how the White Sox are actually still shopping him. Their asking price is really high, but they're still shopping him. And you sit there and you think to yourself, okay, you have him really for 3 years. You clearly don't want him on your team. You don't value him. I wonder if it's because of the drop-off in the second half. Like the team was bad, so he stopped doing really well. He looked really bad at the plate. Looked like he didn't want to be there. The body language was terrible. This could be a preference of the front office. They may be sitting there going, look, you got a ton of talent, but we don't like your attitude. You're always injured.
Yeah.
And you had a bad attitude. He's got the talent and the tools to be an absolute superstar. If he goes someplace else and he's on a good team, I expect him to be a perennial all-star and a guy who's having major moments in the postseason. And we're going to be sitting there going, he was ours and we gave him away. That's how we're going to feel. But I think this team looks at him as, you're always injured, and I didn't like your attitude last year. Like, because if they're shopping him, if they're out there right now shopping him when he's at his lowest value, and they're asking for a lot, that's true. But if they're sitting there with 3 years of control on Luis Robert Jr., and Bob Nightingale's right about the fact they really are shopping him and trying to find somebody to come and take him, they're done with him for a reason. There's something there that they don't think meshes with their clubhouse and what they want to build. And that's crazy when you think about the talent you're giving up. Is their opinion, do you think their opinion is that bad on him right now? And that's why he's being shopped?
Yeah. And I think it's probably mostly with the mental and not with the physical. I mean, injuries happen. Guys can be injury prone. I do think they kind of look at like somebody like Byron Buxton, for example, from the Twins, who is a guy that is also talked about with hushed tones as far as the level of talent that he brings. And he'd be this massive game-changing guy in center field for the Twins, but he's never on the damn field to for any stretch of the time. And lately when he has been, he's gotten just worse and worse and worse. The talent sort of fades as the physical doesn't follow through. I mean, you age and you lose it, right? That's what happens to athletes. And I think what you're looking at for them is, ignoring the 56 games in 2020 because that was the COVID season, he only plays 68 games in 21. He gets up to 98 games in 22. His high is still 145 games in 2023, and he went backwards last year to 100 games. So he's a guy that's, kind of expensive for never really being available. And if he really did sulk last year and did really give up on the team, he may be so sour on the organization too that there's just no way for them to bring him back from the abyss. And the last thing you want to do, I think, if you're the White Sox, is pay a guy a lot of money to sit there and not care. But I agree that if he's going to get traded, somebody is going to get a guy that is going to immediately spark and go. I mean, there's a reason why I've seen, as I've been reading around, like the Blue Jays would love to have Luis Robert Jr. in their outfield next year. They would love to have him in New York on the Mets. They'd probably love to have him on the Yankees, especially if Juan Soto's not coming back. There's a lot of teams, I think, that are going to be interested in him. The question is going to still be, not only what do you get back and what kind of talent comes back for this, and did you get enough, but also it's going to be, what the hell are you going to do with this stuff? Because Robert Jr. is one of those guys that was so can't miss. I mean, we knew, you saw it in 2020. You saw it start to emerge in 2020.
You saw it in 23. Last year, he was really good. You saw it in 23. You saw what he could be. And you have to wonder whether or not this is the front office that sits there and says, okay, but we're done with the injuries and we don't like the mental makeup. And so we're since our window isn't now, then what can we get for him? And that seems to be what the mentality is right now. If they really valued him, they wouldn't be shopping him. I think they're shopping him because they're like, we're hoping that somebody who misses out on Soto or says, you know what, he's just somebody who needs to be in a better situation, that they'll give something close to what the asking price is right now, and they'll be able to move him. At this point, I wouldn't be shocked if he moved on. The weird thing is, though, you're sitting there telling me a guy you got 3 years of control of that you're ready to move on from because it isn't time yet. And then Nightingale's also reporting that one of the big names being bandied about between the White Sox and the Phillies in a possible Garrett Crochet move is Alec Boehm. I like Alec Boehm. He's not a bad baseball player. He had a 3B WAR last year. Okay, that was his best year ever, though. If you look at his 2023, at 26 years old. This guy hit 274 with a 765 OPS. He had 20 home runs. Ain't bad. Ain't bad at all. 26 years old. And he came out in the first half of 27 and he was gangbusters. Most of that 3B WAR, those wins above replacement, most of that comes from the first half. But he regressed in the second half back to what he was in his year 26 season the year before. Instead of hitting 274 for the year, he hit 280. Basically the same thing. He was 5 points higher on his on-base percentage. He was, looks like 11 points higher on his slugging percentage. His OPS was 779 instead of 765. Like, he regressed back to the mean. So is he a guy going into his age 28 season who the White Sox are like, we think he's right on the cusp of being a star. That's why we want to go get him. But then even if he is on the cusp of being a star, even if they do believe that Ryan Fuller, their hitting guy, and that this team, this makeup, can get more out of Alec Boehm than what the Phillies were able to get out of them. Even if they go out and do that, you only have control of him for the next 2 years. His window is smaller than Robert Jr.'s. So it's a really weird thing. Like, why would you trade Garrett Crochet for a guy like this? The mixed messages from the front office right now, I don't know when they think they're competing. Do they intend to go and get a guy like this, make a couple free agent signings, and in 2026 be competing for the division? And do they believe that this is the kind of guy that they would immediately try to re-sign long-term because they really believe in him, and that's why he's a name that they sound like they're interested in with the Phillies? I mean, so much so that the Phillies are already looking at Alex Bregman as the possible replacement in free agency for Boehm. So they're clearly looking to move him.
Well, and you always wonder, like I've said a million times, when you're hearing names, notable names that are willing to be moved by a team, you have to ask yourself why. Okay, if the Phillies, who are intending on contending again this year, are willing to move their starting third baseman of the past couple of years, a guy that is still relatively inexpensive for them. And the Phillies are not made of money. They have high-priced guys, but they're also old, high-priced guys, right? JT Realmuto is getting old. Bryce Harper's actually kind of getting old. Nick Castellanos is an old guy. Kyle Schwarber's kind of an old guy, right? If somebody like Boehm is available and they want to sign Alex Bregman, who, again, is not younger than Boehm and has the benefit of being a better third baseman than Boehm, I'll give him that. Bregman's, defensively a better guy. Boehm is not really known as a slick fielding third baseman. He's good enough. But you're looking at this going, well, what does he bring? And my question is, with Alec Boehm, and you tendered a contract to Andrew Vaughn, who's a slightly worse version of Alec Boehm, who doesn't play third base, where does he fit in? Because Miguel Vargas is supposed to be your third baseman, or Brian Ramos is supposed to be your third baseman.
Oh, I think they're done with Vargas. I think they re-signing Vaughn instead of thinking to themselves like, we're going to put Vargas over at first base. I don't know. They may have looked at that and said, well, okay, well, we screwed up in that trade. That might literally be what's going on. It might be like, this isn't what we wanted. Because think of all the at-bats that he got with the Dodgers before he got here, and then think what he did when he got to the White Sox. I don't think he's guaranteed a thing right now. And I don't know if Brian Ramos is guaranteed very much. I mean, here's a guy.
Well, I'm not saying these guys are guaranteed
anything.
No,
but that's the thing. Like if you go out and get Boehm, like here's the interesting thing. The way the article's written, and it's always those notes, around the league type thing going on with.
Right. It's always a little blurb.
With Nightingale, right. But he does write a good couple of paragraphs on the Phillies. And in that, he says that the Phillies have spoken about Boehm and outfield prospect Justin Crawford in extensive trade talks with the White Sox for starter Garrett Crochet. But the Sox are concerned with Boehm's struggles in the second half. Like I said, he fell off in the second half. He only had a 681 OPS and only 4 home runs in the second half. He was on pace to do much better. So I don't know if this is the Phillies talking to Nightingale saying, well, we don't know why they don't want Boehm. And the Sox are like, of course we don't want Boehm, right? Like maybe they aren't interested in him in any way. It wouldn't make a lot of sense. It would also, though, think about it this way. You get the opportunity to get Crawford, who's a really good prospect, who could slot into your outfield for a while, who's already at the AA level and looks ready to jump into AAA next year and could be at the majors as early as 26. if Bohm comes and Crawford comes and they end up picking up another prospect that they like, because the Phillies do have a few of them sitting at the AA level that are close to the major leagues, and that might be the package. Like, hey, we're going to give you this guy, and we're going to give you Bohm as well. You start to wonder, like, well, what are we doing here? Is Bohm just essentially the professional hitter, right? It's like the cheaper way to go do the thing I said they should go do. Go get a guy whose OPS is higher than league average. Go get a guy who can field his position. Go get a guy who could hit 20 home runs, and if you unlock something here as he's in the middle of his career, could hit 30 of them. And be okay with the fact that you only have 2 years of him, because it's cheaper than going out and spending $15 million a year to go get a professional hitter. And then hope that he loves the White Sox so much and we're building that you're able to sign him or you deal him in the middle of not 2025, but in the middle of 2026 as you're building your team up. If the real goal is the prospects, like that's the only way I could wrap my head around this. But as I read the article, I wonder, is this something the Phillies floated and the White Sox are like, no, we don't have plans like that. Sox in the Basement listeners trying to make the most of your money. Give a call to Tom Walsh, your Edward Jones financial advisor. Located on the corner of 111th and Kedzie, but serving the Chicagoland area, Tom has a get-to-know-you approach and a do-the-right-thing attitude. He's been doing this for decades. It's all about knowing your options when you're investing and planning for your retirement. No matter what stage you are at, it costs nothing to check in with Tom. Give Tom Walsh, your Edward Jones financial advisor, a call today, 773-779-0023. Edward Jones, member SIPC.
The talent that you have, if you're going to rely on young guys, you're not going to go out and sign a third baseman. If you want to do that with Bohm and then sit there and say, well, Ramos and Vargas are done. We've seen all we need to see on them. Okay, that doesn't necessarily fill out your lineup. And maybe Bohm is a guy that you just sit there and say, you're going to play here in 25, and then we'll see what happens in the offseason. Or he's a guy that you looked at him defensively and said, you're a DH, pal, and you and Vaughn can swap off. There's reasons to pick the guy up. And he's not a terrible player, and maybe he is somebody that Fuller, again, we get back to these gurus, does he see something in him? But I think you're right. One of those things may very well be, look, if you want to get Justin Crawford, you got to take one of our major league players off of our hands that we don't want. Now, if I'm going to do that, I would much rather them take Alec Bohm, who's got some potential going forward still, and could put two good halves together and start really figuring out what he is and what he needs to be, and could be a guy that resigns longer term, whatever. I mean, he could be the next Justin Turner for all we know, over Nick Castellanos, over the overpriced Kyle Schwarber, and anybody else that they might sit there and want to deal out that is a higher priced veteran, right? So if that's the case, and there is something to be said about that too across the league, sometimes you take a contract or you take a player back that is useful, but you don't necessarily want in order to get what you really, really want out of it. So it could just very well be that the Phillies are floating it to a lot of places. Look, if you want Justin Crawford, if you want this guy, okay, because this guy looks like a stud, then you're going to take one of our dogs. They're cute dogs. They're fluffy and friendly dogs. They'll play fetch with you. They're great, but they're still a dog. And, so you get the stud, you get a dog, that's okay. And that's kind of how the game is played sometimes too. And I imagine with Robert Jr., that's going to be a situation where that's the case. And the only thing I wouldn't quibble with Nightingale is that's a situation where if the White Sox were to do that and get Justin Crawford back for Luis Robert Jr., and you had to take Alec Bohm back, that's, given what Robert has shown, that's a much more palatable package than I think Garrett Crochet. But I also do think that with both Crochet, who spoke up against the White Sox, Robert, who appeared to be sulking and has been inconsistent in his career, and at times has shown himself to be a little, disinterested. And you saw it with Eloy Jimenez getting traded last year, another guy that we had said body language and everything was way off. Yohan Moncada, who was just too expensive for anything but there does seem to be a cleansing here where the White Sox are looking at guys, and Alec Bohm may very well would be one of those dudes that they just sit there and go, look, the guy has the right attitude. He's got some talent. He's a guy that we can trust to go out there. I mean, the one thing I will say about Bohm, he does not miss a whole hell of a lot of time. 152 games, 145 games, 143 games. That's not bad.
It's a changing of what they want the makeup of the team to be. I mean, it really feels that way. I mean, it's just like how the front office was drastically changed. A lot of people are gone, and a lot of new people are in there. So this is kind of how Chris Getz operates. He kind of looks at it and goes, okay, I have to rip it out at the root. And that's what he's trying to do as much as he can when he can't rip everything out because, Tony's still walking around and Jerry's still the owner. But he's ripping as much out of the team, and now he seems to be trying to do it with his active roster. And an interesting note in the Nightingale article that I did not get to yet, but I wanted to point out. Bob Nightingale, at the end of this same article, goes on to say that the Athletics are expected to spend money this offseason, bringing their payroll to $100 million because the owners and the Players Association are upset because of all the revenue sharing money that they receive and how low their payroll is. Now remember, they were the exception to the rule last year. Everybody was at $90 million or higher in Major League Baseball except for the A's. The White Sox right now look like they're on pace to be the A's of this year with their payroll based upon the way that they're going out and spending money. According to Spotrac, $33.8 million on the active roster. They have $6.5 million in retained salary for a total of just over $40 million on the payroll. They're projected another $10 million in arbitration. Andrew Vaughn is 6 of that. Remember we talked about that? And they're projected $14 million in pre-arb. And that could really fluctuate. So they're sitting a little bit over $60 million with their payroll right now. And I'm really curious. Are they going to go spend? When you have the A's expected to spend $100 million and they suck and don't have a home, and they're not going to be bringing in any gate whatsoever in the tiny little ballpark that they're playing in, right? Like, how are you going to go out there and justify a $60 to $70 million payroll, which would be at this point the lowest in Major League Baseball by $20 to $30 million in a major market? So that's why I go back to what I said earlier. The moves are weird right now. It's all this team building stuff. It makes sense if then you're going to go out and spend some of that money and bring yourself to $90 or $100 million, going out and signing big name relief pitchers you can flip and maybe a bat or two that helps you in these building years.
Socks in the basement. Socks in the basement. Socks in the basement.
Socks in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found and always on socksinthebasement.com.